Kim Cameron is one of my favorite scholars, one of my favorite people. I'm so excited to teach. I teach his Developing Management Skills class at Eastern Michigan University. And I'm just so excited he said yes about coming in and sharing some information regarding his latest book. And it says here, this book reveals one of the most important but frequently ignored factors that lead to spectacular performance in organizations. Kim Cameron is a true pioneer in the study of positive leadership, offers validated scientific evidence that all individuals are inherently attracted to and flourish in the presence of positive energy, a principle known in biology as heliotropism. Further, he shows that a positive relational energy generated by leaders, virtuous behaviors such as generosity, compassion, gratitude, trustworthiness, forgiveness, and kindness is tightly linked to extraordinary organizational outcomes like greater innovation, higher products, increased engagement, and retention. Dr. Cameron has not written a feel-good tome about the power of positive thinking, happyology, or unbridled optimism. This research-based explanation shows how to achieve performance that exceeds expectations. He provides practical suggestions, assessments, and exercises showing how leaders can improve their own positive energy and increase positive relational energy in organizations. Positively energizing leadership is a major contribution to the theory and practice of leadership. And I want to say that you, in my research, you are so well published. How many? More than 140 academic articles, more than 15 scholarly books. That's incredible. Welcome, Dr. Cameron.
Kimberly, you're very, very generous and very kind. Thanks for the invitation. I mean, I'm flattered and delighted to be able to talk today to this group.
And can you tell us a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit? Why did you write this book?
So this book called Positively Energizing Leadership was written literally in order to make available in the public domain some research findings that simply had not been published before. I mean, the heliotropic effect has been a phenomenon studied in biology, especially plant biology, since the 1800s. But it's been ignored for the last 50 years, and it's never been applied to human beings or social sciences. And I just felt like it needs to be there. I had several people say, oh, you need to get a publicist, you need to get somebody to trumpet you and make you a hero and so on. And I said, I'm not interested in that at all. I'm interested in making sure that the message is available. I don't care about having to be on TV or one more TED Talk or something. That's not relevant at all. It is to have the information out there. The other part is, and I'll share this with you in just a minute as we talk about it. The question then is, well, how do you foster, enable, create more positive energy? How do you enhance, how do you make the heliotropic effect real? So I just felt like there was a contribution to be made that would be hopefully helpful to people. And that's the whole point of writing the book. We don't need one more book, you know, but that was it.
Well, I have to tell you, I could not put it down. In fact, I just had to get it back from friends. I'm like, I need that book back. I can't loan it out anymore.
Well, you are wonderful. Thank you, Kimberly. Why don't I share, if you don't mind, some slides? Well, let me start with this slide. It's not unusual. In fact, this morning I spent some time with some executives from actually all over the world.
Wow.
And several of them are in healthcare, and healthcare is just getting battered because the demands on their time are increasing. People are taking more and more early retirements because it's so stressful and difficult. And it's really hard in that industry right now to get anybody to pay attention to positive, which I really understand. I mean, it's not unusual for people to say to me, look, this is too soupy, syrupy, saccharine sweet for me. I mean, I'm under a lot of stress. And just thinking happy thoughts, being nice, it's just a side trip for me. It's just not relevant, for heaven's sake. I mean, if you could show me how this pays off at all, I might pay attention. Otherwise, don't bother me with it. Substanceless, soft naivete, and so on. So what I'd like to do is, see if I can make this work. What I'd like to do is share for a few minutes some evidence that, in fact, the positive matters, especially positive leadership matters, and something that's emerged from the research. It just hasn't been available before now, and that has to do with positive energy. We'll talk about that. And then one or two, maybe three or four potential actions, tools, practices that people could implement. And then I'm happy to spend time with buts, objections, but Cameron, this didn't work in my place, and so on. Well, let me start, Kimberly, if it's okay, with just
Absolutely.
the background. Before I get to the discussion about positive energy. So think of the slide across the line across the top of this slide as representing a deviance continuum. Now, in English, the word deviance has a negative connotation. Normally means, if you're a deviant, if I call you a deviant, normally means a negative. It's problematic. But you can think of negative deviance. You can also think of positive deviance. Well, there are several important implications of thinking of deviance on a continuum. One implication is that all organizations exist to eliminate deviance. The reason we organize is to eliminate unexpected aberrant behavior. So organizations, by definition, aspire to be right in the middle of that continuum. But, excuse me, we know a lot more about one end of this continuum than the other. So think, for example, of physical health. On the left-hand side, we call that illness. I got flu, I got COVID, I've got heart disease, I'm not feeling well. 90% of all medical research focuses on the gap between the left-hand side and the middle. Once I'm in the middle, I'm doing fine. Medical science stops paying attention. Psychologically, it's the same. 95% of psychological research focuses on the gap between the left-hand side and the middle. So on the left-hand side is depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, schizophrenia, and so on. Once I'm in the middle, it's called subjective well-being is fine. Psychology essentially stops studying. Now, of course, there's positively deviant physical health. It's Olympic fitness levels, as you'd be able to run an Ironman competition, somebody different than me. Some research, not a lot. All right, organizations are very much the same. Most agenda items in organizations focus on the gap between the left-hand side and the middle. Market share is not going up, stressful employees, customers are not satisfied, got quality problems, and so on. Boy, we pay a lot of attention to that. On the right-hand side, that gap dominates us. On the right-hand side, the difference between we're doing fine, market share is fine, making money, profitability, employees are satisfied. The gap between that and the right-hand side, which I refer to as a virtuous condition, is something I refer to as abundance gaps. Now, on the right-hand side, the reason I refer to that as an abundance condition is because in the original, a virtuous condition, in the original Latin and Greek, virtuousness means the best of the human condition. The highest aspirations we have for ourselves is a virtuous state. So when you're at your best, at your peak, that's virtuousness. So the question is, how do you get an organization from we're doing fine to spectacular, extraordinary, better than we aspire to be? Well, that's all introduction to this slide. This is the most important slide, which is if you focus on abundance gaps, that is the gap between we're doing fine and we're virtuous, we're the best of the human condition, you unleash something called the heliotropic effect. Now, the heliotropic effect is defined essentially as follows. Kimberly's already mentioned. Every living system, everything alive, has a tendency toward the light and away from dark, or toward positive energy away from negative energy. See, in nature, the sun is a source of positive energy. It's the life-giving force. So, most accurately defined, the heliotropic effect is every living system has a tendency toward that which is life-giving. In nature, the sun is a life-giving force, and away from that which is life-depleting, or that which endangers life. Now, that's true of every living system. Certainly, if all human beings flourish in the presence of positive energy, languish in the presence of negative energy, it matters, has big implication. Has implication for how we rear our children, what kind of incentive systems we put in organizations, what kind of relationships we have with colleagues, and so on. So let me very briefly, again, just by way of introduction, highlight a few studies, a small sample of studies that confirm the heliotropic effect. So one of them has to do with emotions. This study's been replicated multiple times. So a physician puts a drop of liquid at the bottom of your nostril in which there's cold virus. People breathe in the virus. Some people get sick and some people don't. And the question is, well, how do you predict who succumbs to the virus versus who's resilient? Turns out the temperature at the back of your throat, where your esophagus meets your nasal passages, a 0.5 degree difference in that temperature causes you to succumb to the virus versus be resilient, and your emotional state affects the temperature. Happy, optimistic, positive, virtuous people get sick significantly less often than other people, especially depressed, angry, cynical people. The classic study that illustrates that is called the nun study. It's a study of 678 Catholic nuns living in a convent. Now, they found the journals or diaries of 180 of these women when they entered the convent 60 years before. Some of these women are saying things like this. This is the culmination of my life's dream. I'm so happy to enter the order. This is such a blessing. Some were saying, this is going to be a sacrifice. This is going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge, but I'm committed. I'm going to follow through. Difference? So they put nuns in two groups, depending on which type of journal they were keeping. Then the study was, they simply analyzed or counted the number of nuns alive 60 years later. Now, these numbers aren't precise, but they're close. They represent the difference. Of the 90 nuns in the first group, 70 were alive. Of the 90 nuns in the second group, 10 were alive. And every decade, there was a significant difference in mortality rates. Those keeping a gratitude, positive, optimistic journal lived on the average 11 years longer than the other group.
Wow.
Let's assume for a minute I'm interested in having all of you become better bowlers. So if I'll give you a big incentive if you can improve your bowling score by an average of 10 pins. So we got to go down to the bowling alley. I'll give you $100 if you can improve your bowling score by 10 pins per game. We're going to get a baseline. We got to know how good you are. So I'll film you as you bowl 3 games. Then half of you, I'll give you film, but I'll show you only when you made strikes and spares. The other half of you, I'll show you when you did not make strikes and spares. So square up, work on your approach, try to improve. 30 days later, just 30 days later, we're going to come back together, go down and bowl 3 more games. Some of you'd get the money. The question is, who'd get the money? And the answer, of course, is those who watch themselves make strikes. The positive will affect your behavior much more than the negative. It's not the case with emotions. Negative causes a bigger reaction with emotions, but behavior is most responsive to the positive. Another example of this is positive practices. So let's assume all of you are in my MBA class and I assign you to keep a gratitude journal, or not a gratitude journal, but a journal. Half of you are going to keep a gratitude journal, meaning you write every single day, you write down in your journal 3 things for which you're grateful. The other half of you just write down 3 events, 3 interactions, 3 problems you faced. At the end of the semester, I'm going to do several studies. I'm going to give all of you a flu shot. 7 days later, I'll test for the number of antibodies in your system. Those keeping a gratitude journal are going to be healthier in 7 days than the other group. It's heliotropic. You will respond to the positive, virtuousness. And by the way, it's not only gratitude, but it's compassion and kindness, generosity, and so on. I give you a mental acuity task. What's that? You have to remember information. You have to memorize information. You have to come up with some sophisticated decision rules for complex data. More mental acuity in the first group, that is the gratitude group, than the other group. I give you a creativity task. What's that? When you have to think of all the things you can use a piece of paper for, or a brick, or a ping pong ball. There will be more ideas in the gratitude journal group and a broader variety of ideas. It's called mental flexibility. I mean, I can affect the way you perform, the way you think. I can affect your grades. This study is, I like this study a lot because it's done with children, ages 3 months to 8 months. What they do is put a child on a caregiver's lap, have them watch a puppet show for maybe 20 seconds. So a puppet tries to walk across the stage, tries to climb a hill, tries to open a box. Then you have 2 other puppets. One tries to help, encourage, support. The other tries to hinder. So after 20 seconds, you bring these 2 puppets out and put it in front of the child, and the child can select whichever puppet he or she wants to play with. The one that supports or the ones that puts a block up, you can't make it up the hill. More than 90% of the time, children select the puppet that tries to help rather than tries to hinder. That is from the time you were 3 months old. There is an inherent tendency toward virtuousness and away from the reverse. It's heliotropic. It's built into the human condition. Here's just some evidence that that's the case. Here's the theory about why. Happens at the cellular level. So I have a friend who works in an organization, they study heart rhythms. So at the top, that's your heart rhythm when you're upset, frustrated, angry. The bottom, that's when you're in a gratitude or virtuous condition, because compassion and generosity and forgiveness and so on does exactly the same thing. Your heart simply is more rhythmic. And now you know why after 60 years, some nuns are alive and some nuns are dead. Your heart works better. And you don't control this. It's heliotropic. You can't say to your heart, beat more rhythmically. You don't control it. This is a study of something called mindset. In this study, you can do this in many ways, but in this study, people are asked to ponder a positive, optimistic future versus a neutral or negative future. So I have you in a mindset, and I'm going to do a scan of your brain. It's called a PET scan. It's like an MRI. More areas of your brain are activated in that positive state. And of those activated, they're activated to a greater extent. You literally are smarter in that positive state versus the other. I'll show you more data about that in a minute. This is a study of, something called coherence. In your body, you've got rhythms, heart rhythms, brain rhythms, muscle twitch rhythms. When everything is perfectly aligned, that's called coherence. And you can measure ideal coherence at 0.1 hertz. That's the oscillation. So at the top, that's when you're upset, angry, frustrated. The middle, this is when you're asleep. The bottom, this is when you're in a gratitude or virtuous condition. You are perfect. Physiologically, you cannot get better. You're at your very peak physiologically, and therefore long-term well-being and so on. Lots of other studies about this. Overcome diseases and whatnot. This is a study of something called vagal tone. You have a vagus nerve, goes from the back of your brainstem down your back, around your heart and back, controls heart rhythms, internal organs, and so on. So I have a colleague who induces a positive, virtuous state and then simply measured vagal tone or nervous system health. Significant enhancement, significant improvement in nervous system health by those in a virtuous state. Your nervous system is better, predicting long-term well-being. And then this is a study of heart health. These are heart disease patients. Half of these people were trying to keep a gratitude journal, half did not. 8 weeks later, just 8 weeks, they measured heart health. Those keeping a gratitude journal had not only deteriorated less, their hearts had actually healed more in just 8 weeks. This is all heliotropic.
Mm.
That is, virtuousness is renewing. It actually fosters renewal in your body. And I'm not going to go through all these, but there's a whole bunch of studies related to anti-aging and brain activity and triglycerides and cortisol and inflammation and antibodies in your system and wound healing and so on. All right.
You know, I feel that every frontline and essential worker needs this today.
Boy, that's really the
Especially.
truth. It's true. Overloading people, and they are overloaded, is difficult. In fact, the prescription, it would be nice if there's a cookbook and all you do is check off things. Unfortunately, it's not like that. But virtuousness is renewing. It fosters renewal. We'll talk about that in just a second. But one other thing, it's also relevant to that, Kimberly. If you are significantly overweight, the probability of dying early is 20%. If you're an excessive drinker, probability of dying early, 30%. If you're a smoker, probability of dying early, 50%. No surprise there. If you're in if you're in poor social relationships, probability of dying early is 70%. I mean, it trumps the physical factors we pay attention to. And the question is, well, why is that? We kind of know that. Happily married people live longer than others. Well, the normal explanation is, I'm getting rewarded. I'm getting my needs met. I mean, it's nice to be popular. It feels good to me, and so on. Lots of consulting firms run around the world measuring the extent to which you're being valued by colleagues, you make a difference, you have a best friend at work, and so on. That's all great and important. But there's another factor that has emerged through this research that's even more important. So let me illustrate it. This study is done by a colleague in a psychology department here. She took entering freshmen at the University of Michigan, asked them to identify their goals for the year. She categorized the goals into two types. One type was called achievement goals. I want to get good grades, I want to be popular, and so on. The other kind of goal was called contribution goals. I want to make a difference. I want to have something get better because of what I've done. So she put people in two groups, depending on which type of goal was dominant for them. Then the study was she simply followed these students for 1 year, measuring how well they got along with the roommates, how many times they got elected to a club office, I mean, social factors, how many minor physiological symptoms they experienced, headache, nausea, got the flu, and so on, missed class, physical factors, what their grade point average was, what their test scores were at the end of each semester. So cognitive, academic factors. On every single dimension, contribution goals trumped achievement goals in predicting performance. It's what people contributed more than what they received that predicted their performance. That's confirmed by a study of kidney dialysis patients. These are people hooked up to a kidney dialysis machine. They were measured on two factors. One is, to what extent are you being loved, supported, and cared for by somebody? The other factor is, to what extent are you loving, supportive, and caring for somebody else? People, the second factor was far more predictive in predicting their physical health than the first. That is, the extent to which they're making a difference in somebody else's life, which is confirmed by a third study of multiple sclerosis patients. This is more rigorously designed. Half of these people were assigned to place a phone call once a week, expressing love, support, and concern to somebody. The other half of these people were assigned to receive a phone call once a week, expressing love, support, and concern. Well, 2 years later, they measured self-efficacy, physical activity, hope, depression. 8-fold difference. Those people who placed the phone call were 8 times more healthy than those people who received the phone call. That is, the contribution people make is what predicts their performance. So that's emerged from our research. It's important to reward. I mean, most organizations do that. If you do something well, we give you a financial incentive, we put your picture on the wall or give you a new parking place or something. Question is, does anybody ever, because they are especially high performers, does anybody ever get a chance to contribute? And there are lots of ideas for that. But let me shift from that quickly to the question, yeah, but Cameron, I got the heart rhythms and brain waves and so on. Okay, but Organizations are much more complex. So what do I do about organizations? Well, that's been my research for the last 20 years. Turns out, so far, no disconfirming evidence. If you foster, create, institutionalize positive leadership practices, virtuousness, you get these outcomes. Profitability goes up, sometimes 5 times industry average. Productivity goes up, quality, fewer errors, less waste. Innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship goes up. Customer satisfaction, customer loyalty goes up. Employee retention, employee engagement goes up. I mean, you're held accountable for those. And there's several implications of this. One of them has to do, for example, with the DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a crucial, important aspect, goal for many organizations. Got to pay attention to this. So there was a meta-analysis done recently in which 700 studies were analyzed. And they discovered that there are 2 major strategies. One strategy is called a demographic strategy. That is, make sure that there's a representative from underrepresented people in any team or any senior executive group. Make sure that there's at least one representative of various kinds of groups, disadvantaged groups. That's one way that's very common. Second strategy is what are called training strategies. Make sure everybody has unconscious bias training, or white supremacy or whatever supremacy training, or microaggression training, and so on. Turns out in this meta-analysis, not only did those strategies not help, but in many cases they made it worse. I mean, holy cow. Well, what's the option? One option is institutionalizing virtuous practices, building a positive, virtuous culture, because that never goes away. See, one of the problems with the other strategies is that the amount of time they last, the longevity of those training interventions, it doesn't last very long. But instituting forgiveness, gratitude, positive meaning, compassion, having people feel valued and so on at work, never goes away. I mean, think about your children.
Yeah.
Your child will never say to you, Mom, stop loving me. It's too much of this. It just continues.
In your book, on page 53, you outline the better approach to DEI, and you say all individuals are encouraged to assist others in fulfilling their highest potential, as well as working towards reaching their own potential. I just love that example.
You are incredible. I cannot believe you, Kimberly. Oh my goodness.
I have my my little flags.
You are fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a study where we took organizations that were least likely to take this seriously, and that is financial services, because they got one goal: show me the money. So we intervened in 40 organizations, tracked them over a 2-year period of time. To what extent are you getting better in implementing and institutionalizing these positive practices? Then we measured the impact on outcomes 2 years later. Up in the upper right-hand or left-hand corner, that R square is interpreted as the amount of variance accounted for. We could account for almost half the financial performance. Do you know anything that predicts Wall Street performance by half, for heaven's sake?
Right.
I mean, it was enormously predictive, and that's not only financial services, but other things, turnover and so on, that you'd expect. And in healthcare, 30 organizations, we simply measured 9 different dimensions that they care about, excuse me, over a 2-year period of time again. And in an industry where the average improvement is between 3 and 4%, we're getting 10 times industry average in terms of improvement by implementing or institutionalizing those practices. And there are many practices. And that's one of the reasons that these books have been written. But what I really want to do is highlight this bottom right one. It's just come out a month or so ago, because the findings in this that are written in this book actually have just not been published. It's not that they're brand new and revolutionary, but they're really important. And it just has never been written up. And that was the motive. So let me explain it in the following way. The question is, how do we identify who the leaders are in organizations? And that's an easily answered question, because normally we say, well, who's in the top box in an organization chart? Whoever's in the top boxes, that's obviously the leader. And that's okay, but there are alternatives to that. One of the most common alternatives is to draw a network map of an organization. Now, excuse me, you know what a network map is? It's in the back of an airline magazine.
Yep.
So some cities at the hub, some in the periphery, you connect them to the airline routes. You can do that in organizations, but people, rather than cities, become the nodes. And the question is, well, how do you determine a network map using people? The most common way is on the basis of information flows. Who gives information to whom? Who gets information from whom? The research is clear. If you're at the hub or center of an information network, your performance is higher than the norm, as is the unit you manage, which makes sense. If all the information flows through you, you can decide what to share. You have an advantage, you're going to do better. An alternative to that is influence networks. Who influences whom? Who is influenced by whom? No surprise, if you're at the hub or center of an influence network, you can influence a lot of people, they follow you and so on. You have an advantage, you're going to do better than the norm. I don't know the percent, but I'll bet 90% of the leadership literature equates leadership and influence. If you're influential, that means you're a leader. That's okay with me. But what's emerged out of our research is another factor. It has to do with energy. Who energizes whom? Who is energized by whom? Now, what does that mean? I mean, when I interact with Kimberley, what happens to my energy? Is she uplifting, elevating, life-giving? Or is she exhausting, depleting? This sucks the life right out of me, in which case she's a de-energizer. And I could get an energy network map in any organization. One of the ways I do it is simply to hand a list around with everybody's name on it, ask every single person to rate their relationship with every other person. Asking the question, when you interact with this person, what happens to your energy? Are you uplifted or are you depleted? On a 1 to 7 scale, 1, I'm very exhausted, depleted. 7, very uplifting, elevated, and life-giving. So I'd have a data matrix in front of everybody's name, a bunch of numbers. I'd put it in a statistical program. It would create a network map. All right, now, I'm going to skip that slide. There are a number of kinds of energy. One's called physical energy, which when I use it, it diminishes. If I run a marathon, I can't do it again. I got to have recovery time. Emotional energy is the same. When I use it, it diminishes. Mental energy, when I expend it, man, I gotta have a break. I gotta recover, recuperation. The only kind of energy that elevates with use is called relational energy. I mean, when do you get exhausted by being around a person with whom you have a loving, supportive relationship? That's renewing. So as it turns out, when we get exhausted in other ways, we need recovery time. We often seek people who are uplifting and elevating, energizing, because it's self-perpetuating. Relational energy will reproduce itself and elevate itself. So we do research on relational energy. And it's very important. But let me show you some of what we learned. Let me first of all do an illustration. How many branches are on this tree?
Lots.
A lot. How many faces are on this tree? Answer 11.
Okay.
Now, you're not aware there are faces on this tree until I point it out. Similarly, you're not aware that energy is a crucial resource until I point it out. That is, it's a very, very important resource in organizations, but we're normally not even aware of it. So let me tell you why it's so crucial. And it's really the motive for writing the book. So this happens to be the positive energy network map of the New York office of a very large international consulting firm, which if I named it, you know it. In the upper right-hand corner is a key. The blue dots are people. The blue dots are principals and directors, the C-suite. most senior people. The yellow dots are the most junior people, new analysts, the people who just at the lower bottom of the hierarchy. Well, look here, what I want to show you is over here on the right-hand side. Whoops, don't want to turn yet. There are a bunch of blue dots over here, hardly energizing anybody. I mean, hardly anybody's saying you're a positive energizer. These are the 6s and 7s. On the other hand, look here in the middle. You have a bunch of these junior level people giving life to the system. Lots and lots of people saying, man, you're an energizer in our organization. The point is, your position in the hierarchy and the extent to which you're a positive energizer are not related. You can be a general, you can be a corporal, you can be a senior level, you can be a new analyst. Doesn't matter, because title and energy are not the same. This shows you the de-energizing network. These would be the 1s and 2s. These are the people sucking the life right out of us. And again, hard to see, but look at this. You've got a bunch of these senior level folks who are killing us, sucking the life right out of this organization. Again, just because you're a senior exec does not mean that you're life-giving to the organization. People can also be really, really important in terms of positive energy and be at the lower levels. Here's another study where we took everybody in a managerial role, collapsed them, called them supervisors. Everybody in a non-managerial role, collapsed them, called them non-supervisors. This shows you the de-energizing network. These are the people who are sucking the life right out of the system. This shows you the same organization when you take out the managers. I mean, it goes away. We're doing fine, thank you very much, except for those hot dogs who are running the place. To their credit, they said, okay, we got a leadership development challenge on our hands, and what we need to do is develop positively energizing leaders. The most important implication is positive energy, positively energizing others, is not personality, it's not charisma, it's not attractiveness, it's a set of behaviors which anybody can learn, anybody can develop, or everybody can develop. So this is a set of behaviors, not just a personality attribute. The correlation between extroversion and introversion, extroverts, versus introverts. The correlation with positive energy is essentially zero. You can be an extrovert, you just exhaust people, as opposed to being an energizer. So it's not the same. All right, here's the most important, please.
Okay. Would you say communication is one of the key
Yes.
attributes to that?
Yes, and I just skipped that, but I'll tell you what the results are.
Okay, fine.
The correlation between communication and energy is very strong and positive. For example, if Kimberley is a positive energizer, I'm attracted to positive energy. It's heliotropic. So more than likely, I'll want to interact with her more. So both frequency and richness of communication goes up. On the other hand, if Kimberley is a de-energizer, I mean, she could be the world's expert, but man, it is so difficult to deal with this woman. Just exhausting. I don't think I will. So communication and energy are positively related.
Okay.
So here's the most important slide, summarizes some of the most important findings. So the top bullet, people who positively energize others are higher performers. You'd expect that. Here's the surprise in the research. Your position in the energy network is 4 times more important in predicting performance than your position in the information network or the influence network. Now think about that. We're constantly managing in organizations information. Did you come to the meeting? Did you get the memo? You understand the goals and so on? We're constantly managing influence. Here's the incentive system. Here's the target. Here's the goals. Here's the pressure. Get the numbers. The question is, does anybody ever manage energy? Does anybody ever get rewarded or recognized or hired or promoted for being a positive energizer? Because it's 4 times more important in predicting performance than what we normally manage. And just like the faces on that tree, we don't even know it exists by and large. We ignore it. It's a crucial resource. Second bullet. If Kimberley is a positive energizer and I can just get around her, my performance goes up. That is, positive energizers affect the performance of those around them. there's a fair amount of research that shows not only if I can interact directly with Kimberley and my performance goes up, but as it turns out, one level of separation away, the person who interacts with me also is affected by Kimberley. I mean, she affects a whole bunch of people in our network by being a positive energizer. And then finally, the highest performing organizations have at least 3 times more positive energizers than normal organizations. I mean, it's heliotropic and anybody can be one. And we want more of them. So the more energy, more energizing, the better in an organization. There's lots more to say about that, but those are the kind of findings. So the summary of all this is virtuousness, which is inherent in all human beings, is the major predictor of positive energy. That is, if I demonstrate, excuse me, virtuous activities, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, generosity, gratitude, and so on, that is heliotropic because it's inherent in human beings. It creates life-giving energy. That in turn leads to performance, not only individual performance, but also organization performance. Bottom line performance goes up, as well as well-being goes up. Now, the question is, how do you find them? And who are they? What are the attributes? This happens to be the result of an interview study of 600 executives who are identified as positive energizers and interviews about them with other people. These are not in sequence, not in order, but they just give you an idea about what the virtuous practices are and how easy it is to have anybody be a positive energizer. So number one is they simply help people flourish without expecting a payback. I mean, that's what moms do. I mean, I don't need a pat on the back if my children flourish. It's just what I want for them. So it's not, I'm only going to help my children flourish if somebody recognizes me as a hero. That's almost silly. That's what positive energizers are. Problem solvers, sometimes before being asked, sort of opportunistic. They see opportunities. Yes, and more than yeah, but. You know, they highlight meaningfulness. They inspire others because they highlight the most important aspects of the work. And that's normally what's the contribution I'm going to make to others. Trust, trustworthiness, and so on. Gratitude, humility, almost always linked. Number 8, they smile. They have a pleasant look on their face. I mean, if I'm grouchy every day, it's probably going to be interpreted as de-energizing. So authenticity, of course, has to be sincere. It can't be just a tool or a technique. They help other people exceed their own performance standards. I mean, the most influential coaches or teachers in our lives helped us do better than we thought we could. And that's a positive energizer, you know, forgiveness and so on. The bottom one, they gather and help positive energizers affect the lives of others. In the most effective organization change initiatives I've ever been involved in, we got organizations to identify the positive energizers in their systems. And in one, it was a global organization with 135,000 staff members. They identified 46 positive energizers from around the world. We got them together in a room, spent a day with them, helped train them, turned them loose, gave them a 90 and 90 challenge. Your job is to infect 90% of this organization with positive practices, positive energy, and abundance culture. And you have to do it in 90 days. That's what 90 in 90 means. It's 96% of this 135 people, 135,000 people were infected in 90 days. Scores went up. I mean, it dramatically affected the performance of that organization. So positive energizers find others. They don't compete with them. They foster them and help them. That's my phone. And normally, I would apologize for that, but given the University of Michigan's football record this week, I'm kind of proud of the fact that.
Yes, exactly.
So here's the summary. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, become more. That's a positively energizing leader. Now, I borrowed that, adapted it from a quotation by John Quincy Adams. We're talking about the 6th president of the United States in the 1800s. So it's old. But that's essentially it. If my motives are to help you flourish, can you imagine every organization, every family, every relationship having that motive? I'm trying to help you flourish. And at the same time, by the way, because contribution redounds to my benefit, it's going to help me as well. But positive energy is a crucial factor. And by and large, we have ignored it. It hasn't appeared in the literature. And so that's why the book is, at least for me, it's important to have had that published, is that this is a crucial factor in helping organizations and individuals get better. Now, I want to leave a little bit of time, and I think we have almost 10 minutes. So let me stop talking, Kimberly, and turn it to you.
You know, I was just thinking about this morning. My daughter works at Walgreens in the pharmacy, and their system was down one day later, late in the week, last week. And she came in and it was just a nightmare. You know, all of these scripts had been printed out and people were lined up out the door. And she said, Mom, I just took charge and I communicated over and over again. And I tried to be especially jovial, you know, with everyone that was in line. And she said it worked out really good.
Oh, fantastic.
And I was in another situation this morning where somebody was a little upset and the clerk was kind of egging them on a little bit. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be a bad thing, you know? And I think that, it can really make a difference when you're in those service situations.
Yeah. Well, your daughter's got a good mom who's a good example.
Hey, thanks. Jervis, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a couple. Thanks. First, I want to say, you know, Kim, thanks so much for this work you've been doing.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Very powerful. I'm assuming sites to all these studies you're talking about are in the book.
Yeah, right? They are. In fact, that was an important part of that book, is to finally make the references available, make the scientific studies accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the statistical package used for those network analysis, is that in there too?
You know, I can't remember if I published it, but there are probably 4 or 5 free network analysis software packages online. This one might have been called, oh gosh. I've forgotten what it's called now.
But you can just put in a 1 to 7 scale and it's going to give you that diagram. That's awesome.
Yeah. In fact, Google just network statistical package or network analysis or something. You'll get a whole bunch of options. And you know, you have to sign up for some, you have to pay, but some of them are just free, and it's easy to create a network map.
Last question I have for you is, I ran into a CEO about 5-6 years ago who became my poster boy for the negative, the too much, the over the top positive mindset. And what was happening was he was just so focused on the positive and what works and what he likes and all that sort of thing, that people under him were upset with him because they didn't feel he was holding people accountable, and people were starting to leave in droves. And do you have any insights about?
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
There's a really, I didn't talk about this at all. There's a study done. I won't talk about the study, but the result of the study indicates that there is a 5-to-1 ratio. And to be fair, there's a ratio between about 3 and about 8 to 1. 3 positives for every negative. That is, organizations do far better if that ratio is present. The highest performing organizations have at least 3 positive inputs to every negative input. Now, it's not 3 to 0. It's not 100 to 1. It's about 3 to 5 to 1. So I have to I have to do the one. I have to deliver corrective feedback. Wait a minute, we're screwing up. Hold away. Wait a minute, you're being held accountable for missing targets and so on. I've got to do that. But there's a tool or technique, a practice for doing that in a way that fosters or elevates the relationship rather than destroys the relationship. So the way I deliver one matters. I mean, there's a skill to doing that. But knowing that there's a one, you have to pay attention to that one. Otherwise, it's soupy, syrupy, saccharine sweet. In fact, more than 8 to 1 is way too syrupy. And people don't even take it seriously. They think, okay, here we go. A. B, it has to be sincere, not a tool or technique.
I have to say, one thing I just love about this book is there's so many specifics in here, like how to interview somebody, right? And ask and test their energy level with the questions that you're asking, right? I mean, there's just so many very specific things that the back is, in the back are different activities, right? Examples of activities and practices that you can use in different situations. It's kind of like a toolbox, right?
I'm just dumbfounded, Kimberly, that you actually know what's in that book. You're incredible.
Oh, so yeah, I mean,
Bless your heart.
I feel like there's so many specifics in here that haven't been brought forth yet in the study of positive organizational scholarship. So, yeah.
Well,
Kimberley,
thank you.
I just wanted to say thanks to Kimberley for arranging this. And Kim, this has been awesome. My work is relational in nature with regards to communication and project teams. I cannot wait to obtain your book, and this is just energizing for me. So thank you for that. And it's nice to see Jervis, and I see some names there that I've seen in the past as well. So thank you. I'm always looking as a still in the corporate world, working with project teams of multiple ages, ethnicities, all different backgrounds, how people can come together in a positive way to achieve a result. And it often happens at the grassroots level with the individual. So thank you so much.
I am going to go ahead.
So much.
I am going to go ahead and just share a few things. I got so excited in the beginning, I forgot to share things. So I work with ISODC, International Society for Organization Development and Change. They are actually sponsoring this event. Please check out this organization if you're interested. Everybody is just saying so much. Thank you for your time today, because I know you're a really popular guy, so we really appreciate that we can learn from you today. For more information, there's a lot of information on U of M's positiveorgs.biz.umich.edu. I have a new book out actually with Mary Ceccanese, and Kim Cameron wrote an endorsement. It's called You Can Create Change, Positive Change at Work. And actually, we're more geared towards the frontline employee, right? So I think these books go together so perfectly. Here's some additional resources, groups. ISODC has a LinkedIn group. We have a culture change and leadership group. But, and Michelle had a question about more information about the analysis software packages. I know, Michelle, that there are references for each of these studies, which might be able to lead you to more information related to them. So be sure to get the book and check that out. But I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Kim Cameron for your time today. And it was very enlightening.
Kimberly, let me just say one more thing.
Yeah.
Your book is wonderful. I mean, it really is. I felt bad that I guess the publisher, somebody told you that you couldn't put something like positive leadership, positive practices for frontline employees. But I thought it was important, because this is not leaders who are trying to change the culture of an organization. This is a person who's sitting in the accounting office or in the receptionist's desk or people who are generally at the lowest level of the hierarchy. And the question is, okay, I'm stuck here in this little cubicle. What can I do? And your book
Yep.
is just outstanding. It's
Oh,
spectacular.
thank you. Because we
So-
need leaders at all levels today
That's right.
in the organization, right? I mean, it's more critical now more than ever. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining us today.